On February 11, 2006, the New York Times published this headline: "Hey, whose grandpa didn't tell some tales?" It was the Times' way of telling us that they had to revise an obituary published 6 days earlier about an iconic entertainer whose most beloved character was Grandpa on the 1960 CBS TV comedy The Munsters. Al Lewis, best known for playing the vampirish grandpa on that fanciful comedy about a not normal family in an otherwise normal neighborhood, had died at age 82 or 95. The Times said it could not be certain. Lewis was known as a brilliant character actor, leftist political candidate, and restaurateur. Just about everyone who has written or done research about Al Lewis has weighed whether the life of this eclectic and outspoken person is about bold activism or monstrous fibs. Lewis's contributions to our lives range from a million escapist TV laughs to bold
Where's
street
Grandpa?
activism.
Here I am, Herman. I was down in the dungeon helping Eddie fix his train set.
Sounds as though you got it fixed.
That's what we know about Al Lewis. There's much more we don't know. Based on what Lewis had told reporters in interviews, his birth year was 1910 or 1923, and he was born Alexander Meister or Albert Meister in New York City, or 287 miles from there in Wolcott, New York, a small town near Lake Ontario. That community in far upstate Wayne County entered the Al Lewis narrative late in his life when a reporter asked why no birth certificate for him in New York City could be located. The journalist had set out to clear up the matter of the actual year in which Lewis was born, but searches for a birth certificate under any of the names he had gone by came up blank in all five boroughs of the city. Lewis then explained that whereas he was a true New Yorker, he had actually come into the world while his mother had briefly lived in Wolcott to work in a factory. But sealing Al Lewis's stature as the greatest man of mystery is that no birth record for any A. Meister could be found in Wayne County either. That's what the Internet Movie Database.com, a public figure biography site, said. IMDb posted that days after Al Lewis's 2006 death, one of his three sons announced that Lewis had in fact been born on April 30th, 1923, not 1910, as he had once claimed. The New York Times speculated that Lewis could have fudged on his age to get the Munsters' grandpa role. If he were born in 23, he was actually a year younger than Yvonne DiCarlo, whose character Lily Munster was supposed to be his daughter in the show. Still, it seems Lewis told a bunch of embellished or false stories about his youth, not to get parts on TV shows, but probably for the joy of telling stories. Al Lewis's lifelong habit of fictionalizing his past brought anything but joy to historians and journalists who, as the Times had done on its obit, sometimes had to revamp or retract information they had confidently published about one of the television era's most beloved and eclectic entertainers. The Times obituary writer Dan Barry, in his revised version, said that almost every claim the actor had made about his early life, his birth date and place of birth, his wartime adventures in the merchant marine, his education, was unverifiable and possibly false. Among those claims by Lewis were that he had faced danger while touring the maliciously anti-union southern United States to help labor leader John L. Lewis organize workers, that he had rallied outside the White House in support of condemned immigrant anarchists Sacco and Vanzetti, that he had performed as a clown in a traveling circus, sold hot dogs at Brooklyn Dodgers games at Ebbets Field, and in the mid 1960s hired Charles Manson to babysit his three children. He recalled Manson as trustworthy and pleasant. Lewis also claimed to have a PhD in child psychology from Columbia University, but the Internet Movie Database said the university had no record of it under his stage name or any of his listed real names. Even those close to Al Lewis were sometimes jolted to find out some truths about his past. In the early 2000s, Karen Lewis, his wife, found documents while preparing for her ostensibly 93-year-old husband's hospitalization for an angioplasty, which showed that he was in fact just 80. That was the first she knew after 2 decades of their marriage of any age discrepancy, but she told the New York Times the discovery did not affect her feelings about her husband. After the news of Al Lewis's contradictory age claims surfaced, a reporter soon examined the actor's commonly reported story that he had served as a paralegal in the trial of the Scottsboro Boys, a landmark civil rights case involving 9 Alabama teenagers falsely accused in 1931 of raping 2 white women. A 1923 birth would have made Lewis 8 during the trial, or college age if he were born in 1910. At whatever stage of life, Lewis said he learned of the Scottsboro Boys' plight after his mother attended a rally for their freedom. His mother, if one trusts Al Lewis's descriptions of her, worked in the New York City garment trades. Calling her an indomitable spirit, Lewis recalled that his mother, born Ina Nidell, had been sent as a teenager to the United States by her Jewish family from an area that, due to frequent border changes, was at times in Poland or Russia. Working long and sweaty hours doing sewing for piecemeal wages and speaking no English, she earned money to bring over to the U.S. her 5 sisters and her parents. Al Lewis, who was inspired by his mother to be a socialist, went on picket lines as a youth with her, proudly saying, "My mother wouldn't back down to anyone." There's nothing suspicious about that classic early 1900s immigrant working class bio. Also perfectly plausible is the 6'1" Lewis's description of his playing basketball in his youth in New York City and later serving as a non hired scout for NBA teams. But was he the very best scout in the game? Lewis boasted to independent radio station WFMU's blog that he was the most knowledgeable man of round ball you have ever met, as he put it, and he challenged the blogger to run that claim past Atlanta area resident Marty Blake, the chief scout for the NBA. Sure enough, Blake concurred, saying Al Lewis knew everything there was to know about basketball from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. That same blog, however, questioned much else about Lewis, including his claim that he worked on the defense committee of the Italian immigrant anarchists Sacco and Vanzetti, who were convicted of murder and robbery in a trial riddled with prejudice over their political activities. In fact, historians acknowledge the trial was a sham. The blog concluding that if there were any semblance of truth to Lewis's story of working on their committee, it would have happened when he was no more than 5 years old. That blog also said Lewis was not in Washington, as he claimed, on the night in 1953 when American leftists Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, sentenced to death for treason, were executed. There is no doubt, however, about Al Lewis's contemporary involvement in progressive politics and social causes. Living out his left-wing values, Lewis donated his time and most of his earnings from the 2-year run of the Munsters to charities, particularly a program helping teenage runaways who were proliferating in the Los Angeles area during the late 1960s. The admiration one feels upon hearing of this altruism quickly turns to skepticism, however, when Lewis identifies one of those kids he brought under his wing. He claimed that person was future homicidal maniac Charles Manson. Lewis claimed Manson babysat for his 3 children. Having unfettered access to the children for 4 or 5 hours, Manson amused them, played guitar for them, and otherwise caused no problems, Lewis recalled. Back in the real world of documented facts, Lewis ran for governor of New York as the Green Party candidate in 1998, opposing Republican incumbent George Pataki. Like a premonition of Bernie Sanders with an accent to match, Lewis toured the Empire State, fervently condemning health insurance companies, polluting industries, U.S. wars, and corporate tax breaks which made the poor overtaxed. At age 88, or was it 75, he won 52,533 votes in that 1998 race, above the 50,000 vote threshold for receiving automatic ballot placement in the subsequent election. 4 years later, however, Lewis decided not to make another run, citing long odds of being elected as a Green. He had filed to be listed on the 1998 ballot as Grandpa Al Lewis to gain momentum from his TV recognition. A state judge turned down the request, but that apparently didn't limit the candidate's exposure. Lewis called for universal health insurance, noting that tax dollars went for Governor Pataki's and members of Congress's health care, while they wouldn't support health insurance for all. In coming years, Lewis addressed the double standards of the war on terrorism and cautioned against falling for quick fixes to injustices. Before the Munsters premiered in 1964, Lewis played New York City police officer Leo Schnauser in the comedy Car 54, Where Are You? From 1961 to 63.
There's a holdup in the Bronx, Brooklyn's broken out in fights. There's a traffic jam in Harlem that's backed up to Jackson Heights. There's a scout troop short a child, cruise ships to wet idle wild. Car 54, where are you?
On behalf of the Whippoorwills, we want you to have these.
We figured your throat may be sore, but your nose is still all right.
That was the last network sitcom filmed in New York City, and real police in Lewis's hometown loved the character. Lewis did public appearances on their behalf. Relations 40 years later between police and radical candidate Al Lewis were cooler when the Green gubernatorial hopeful criticized police use of force practices as racist. Everyone, however, loved Grandpa, and Lewis's most memorable TV character was how he was often addressed by political supporters, TV fans, and customers at Grandpa's Bel Gente Italian, a Greenwich Village restaurant he founded and where his regular presence was a draw. Lewis would greet customers as they entered, chatting with them, posing for pictures, and signing autographs. One unlikely sounding distinction by Al Lewis that was in fact documented before millions is that he was once censored by Howard Stern. You heard right, censored by Howard Stern, America's chief potty mouth of the air. Lewis, who discussed political issues with iron fervor on his own Saturday radio show in the early 2000s on New York City's WBAI, once joined Stern in an outdoor rally against the FCC's frequent fining of Stern and others for regular use of words banned on the airwaves. Not realizing that his public address microphone also was tied into a live broadcast of Stern's show, Grandpa told the crowd, "We're here because we have a purpose." And he summarized that purpose by saying, and I'm abbreviating the real problem word which Lewis unknowingly shouted over the air 4 times, quote, "F the FCC, F 'em, F 'em, F 'em." An uncharacteristically mortified Stern frantically slapped his hand on the mic to try to keep his fines from piling even higher. For once, there was no doubting the sincerity of Al Lewis's words.